Right, everyone, drop what you're doing because we're about to delve into a political saga so explosive it makes Guy Fawkes look like someone letting off a party popper. While you're likely debating whether pineapple belongs on pizza or scratching your head over why your energy bill rivals Everest, the government has been sitting on a report so damning they are genuinely concerned it could spark riots in the streets. Yes, you heard that correctly. We're talking about an official government report that's apparently so shocking, so politically ruinous, that Downing Street is reportedly bricking it about potential civil unrest. It's as if they've accidentally fashioned a political nuclear bomb and are now scrambling to defuse it without detonating themselves in the process. The report in question is Baroness Casey's Grooming Gang's audit, and according to GB News national reporter Charlie Peters, its contents are so stark and severe they could truly astound the nation. Now, when a government that's navigated more scandals than a reality TV show is worried about shocking the nation, you know we're dealing with something that dwarfs previous political blunders into minor administrative hiccups. But here's where it gets truly captivating, and by captivating, I mean more politically volatile than a fireworks factory having a very bad day. This report could be published as early as Monday, meaning Sir Keir Starmer might have to face Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday, having spent the last 6 months dismissing calls for precisely the kind of inquiry this report apparently recommends. It's akin to spending months asserting you don't need an umbrella while standing in a downpour, only to discover you're about to get utterly drenched. The timing here is so politically poisonous it makes radioactive waste seem like a health supplement. For half a year, Starmer has been swatting away demands for a national inquiry like he's dealing with flies at a summer barbecue. Conservatives have been clamouring for it, Reform UK has been vociferously demanding it, and even some of his own Labour MPs have quietly suggested it might be a sensible idea. But no, Starmer has held his ground, likely believing he could ride out the storm like a political surfer convinced the wave wouldn't break. Well, guess what? The wave is about to break, and it's looking less like a gentle splash and more like a political tsunami that could sweep away everything in its path. Charlie Peters has warned that this report could prove very politically dangerous for Labour, which in political parlance translates to an unmitigated disaster that makes Black Wednesday look like a minor inconvenience. Let's discuss what we know so far, because the details emerging are more damaging than a burst pipe in a server room. According to sources familiar with the report, Baroness Louise Casey specifically links illegal migration with violence against vulnerable girls. Now, if you think that's politically sensitive, you're absolutely right. It's the kind of finding that makes politicians break out in cold sweats and reach for the Crisis Management Handbook. The Home Office is apparently terrified that knowledge of this connection between undocumented arrivals and grooming gangs could trigger further civil unrest. They are observing what unfolded in Rotherham during last August's summer disorder and contemplating, if people riot when they hear rumours, what happened when they read an official government report confirming their worst fears. And here's a statistic that should make everyone involved in this mess feel profoundly uncomfortable. There have been more convictions for one day of rioting in Rotherham than there have been for 25 years of grooming gang activity. Let that sink in for a moment. More people have been prosecuted for a single day of civil disorder than for a quarter-century of systematic child abuse. If that doesn't make you question our justice system's priorities, I don't know what will. This tells you everything you need to know about how our institutions have been handling this crisis. They can move heaven and earth to prosecute rioters within weeks, but somehow, prosecuting child abusers takes decades and requires parliamentary pressure to instigate proper investigations. It's like having a fire brigade that's exceptionally efficient at arresting people who shout, "Fire," but can't quite manage to extinguish actual blazes. The political ramifications of this report are so severe that you can practically feel the panic radiating from Westminster like heat from a faulty radiator. Starmer has spent months positioning himself as a reasonable, measured leader who doesn't need to resort to populist inquiries. He's been the adult in the room, the sensible one who isn't swayed by political pressure or media campaigns. But what happens when an independent report from a respected figure like Baroness Casey essentially states he was wrong? What happens when the very inquiry he's been rejecting gets recommended by someone who cannot be dismissed as a political opportunist? It's like spending months insisting you don't need to see a doctor, only to have a medical professional tell everyone you're seriously unwell. The Conservative response has been swift and predictably triumphant. Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp has called for a parliamentary vote on Wednesday, telling The Telegraph that if Labour votes against a proper inquiry, it will be a day of shame for Labour. That's not just political rhetoric, that's a trap being laid with all the subtlety of a bear trap in a children's playground. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch has piled on with even more enthusiasm, stating that if Casey joins survivors and Conservatives in demanding an inquiry, the Prime Minister will have no excuse left. She's concluded with a killer line: Starmer must stop being a lawyer and start being a leader. That's not just a political attack, that's a character assassination with a smile. The phrase, stop being a lawyer and start being a leader, is particularly devastating because it plays into existing perceptions about Starmer, the image of him as someone who's more comfortable parsing legal technicalities than making bold political decisions. It's like accusing someone of being too cautious to cross the road, even when the traffic lights are green and there isn't a car in sight. Now, let's talk about the timing of all this political drama, because the universe apparently possesses a sense of humor darker than a Tim Burton film festival. This report is being released just as 7 men have been convicted in Rochdale for sexually exploiting 2 teenage girls between 2001 and 2006. The men, aged between 41 and 67, groomed victims from age 13, treating them as sex slaves after plying them with drugs, alcohol, and cigarettes. The official response to these convictions has been the usual parade of apologies and admissions of failure. Detective Superintendent Alan Clearo acknowledged that police had information they could and should have acted upon, done something with, and we didn't. Sharon Hubber from Rochdale Borough Council also apologized, stating, more could and should have been done. It's like watching a broken record of institutional failure, except this broken record has been playing for decades while children suffered. These convictions are part of Operation Linton, with 37 individuals charged so far and 5 more trials scheduled from September. That's progress, certainly, but it's progress that's taken so long it makes glacial movement look speedy. When you're celebrating convictions for crimes that happened over 20 years ago, you're not exactly demonstrating a justice system firing on all cylinders. The fact that all of this is happening simultaneously isn't a coincidence, it's perfect storm conditions politically. You've got fresh convictions highlighting past failures, a report that apparently confirms institutional negligence, and a Prime Minister who spent months arguing that no inquiry is needed. It's like watching someone insist their house isn't on fire while smoke pours out every window and the fire brigade is already on scene. According to The Times, Starmer is expected to be informed that white British victims were institutionally ignored for fear of racism. If that's accurate, it's the kind of finding that will haunt political careers for decades. It's not just an admission of failure, it's an admission that children were sacrificed to avoid difficult conversations about race and culture. That's not political correctness gone wrong, that's moral bankruptcy dressed up as sensitivity. The recommendation for a national inquiry to explore perpetrators' race and allegations of a cover-up is politically radioactive material. It's the kind of investigation that will uncover uncomfortable truths that everyone knew but nobody wanted to officially acknowledge, like finally admitting that the Emperor has no clothes, except in this case, the Emperor is the entire British establishment, and the clothes are basic competence in child protection. The fear of civil unrest isn't just about public order, it's about political stability. When people lose faith in institutions to protect children, when they see decades of cover-ups and failures, when they discover that political considerations trump child safety, the social contract starts breaking down. That's not just a law and order issue, that's a fundamental threat to democratic legitimacy. The government's nervousness about civil unrest tells you they know exactly how damaging this report is going to be. They are not worried about a few angry tweets or strongly worded editorials. They are worried about people taking to the streets because they've lost faith in the system's ability to deliver justice through normal channels. That's the kind of worry that keeps prime ministers awake at night. But here's what's truly infuriating about this whole situation: the government has had months to get ahead of the story. They could have announced their own inquiry, set the terms, controlled the narrative. Instead, they've been dragged, kicking and screaming, towards accountability, like a toddler being forced to tidy their room. Now they are facing an independent report that they can't control, with findings they apparently can't stomach, at a time when they've got no political cover left. The parliamentary vote that Chris Philp has called for is political genius masquerading as a democratic process. It's designed to force Labour MPs to vote against an inquiry just as an independent report is recommending exactly that inquiry. It's like asking someone to vote against fire safety regulations while their house is burning down. Whatever they choose, they are going to look terrible. If Labour votes against the inquiry, they'll be voting against the recommendations of an independent report and ignoring the wishes of victims. If they vote for it, they'll be admitting they were wrong for 6 months and that their opponents were right all along. It's a political trap so perfect it should be displayed in a museum of parliamentary warfare. The phrase, "Day of Shame for Labour," isn't just political rhetoric, it's an accurate description of what Wednesday could become. Imagine having to stand up in Parliament and argue against an inquiry that an independent report has just recommended, while fresh convictions are highlighting the scale of past failures. It's like arguing against life jackets while the Titanic is sinking. Keamy Badenoch's attack line about Starmer needing to stop being a lawyer and start being a leader is particularly effective because it taps into broader concerns about his leadership style, the perception that he's more comfortable with legal technicalities than political courage, more interested in parsing words than making decisions. It's character assassination disguised as constructive criticism. The connection between illegal migration and grooming gangs that the Casey report apparently makes is the kind of finding that will dominate political discourse for months. It's exactly the kind of uncomfortable truth that politicians have been desperate to avoid confronting, like discovering that the thing you've been most afraid to look at is actually the thing you most need to address. The fact that this connection is being made by Baroness Casey, rather than a politician, makes it infinitely more credible and infinitely more damaging. You can dismiss political attacks as partisan point scoring, but you can't dismiss independent analysis from respected figures. It's like the difference between your opponent saying you're wrong and an expert witness confirming it under oath. The government's apparent fear that this report could trigger civil unrest shows they understand the explosive nature of what they are dealing with. This isn't just another political scandal that will blow over in a few news cycles. This is the kind of revelation that changes how people view their institutions permanently, like finding out your trusted doctor has been making you sicker rather than better. The comparison between riot prosecutions and grooming gang prosecutions is politically devastating because it reveals misplaced priorities in the starkest possible terms: more resources, more urgency, more success in prosecuting people who are angry about grooming gangs, than in prosecuting the grooming gangs themselves. It's like arresting more people for complaining about crime than for committing it. This statistic will haunt political careers because it's so easy to understand and so hard to justify. How do you explain to voters that the justice system can move swiftly when it wants to, but somehow couldn't manage swift action when children were being abused? It's the kind of question that destroys political credibility faster than a vampire in sunlight. The institutional failures revealed by these convictions aren't just historical embarrassments, they are ongoing indictments of how our systems work when nobody's watching. When Detective Superintendent Clero admits they had information they should have acted on but didn't, he's not just talking about past mistakes, he's revealing how institutional priorities actually work. When Sharon Hubbard's apology from Rochdale Borough Council is particularly hollow, it's because it follows the standard template: acknowledge failure, express regret, promise to do better. But what does doing better actually mean when the failures were so systematic and so prolonged? It's like apologizing for burning down the house and promising to be more careful with matches. The fact that Operation Linton has 37 individuals charged and 5 more trials scheduled shows the scale of what we're dealing with. This isn't a few bad apples, this is an orchard that's been rotting for decades while the authorities pretended everything was fine. Each conviction reveals not just individual guilt but institutional negligence on a massive scale. The political danger facing Starmer isn't just about this one issue, it's about what this reveals about his judgment and leadership. If an independent report confirms that he was wrong to resist calls for an inquiry, what does that say about his ability to read political situations and make correct decisions? It's like a weather forecaster insisting it won't rain while standing in a downpour. The recommendation for exploring perpetrators' race isn't just about gathering statistics, it's about confronting uncomfortable truths that have been avoided for political reasons. The fear of being called racist has apparently been stronger than the imperative to protect children. That's not cultural sensitivity, that's moral cowardice with devastating consequences. The allegations of a cover-up that the report apparently addresses go to the heart of institutional legitimacy. If authorities didn't just fail to protect children but actively covered up that failure, then we're not dealing with incompetence but corruption. That's the kind of revelation that destroys public trust permanently. The timing of this report in relation to PMQs is politically perfect for Starmer's opponents and absolutely terrible for him. Imagine having to stand at the dispatch box defending a position that an independent report published 3 days earlier has essentially demolished. It's like trying to argue that water isn't wet while standing in a swimming pool. The 6 months of rejecting inquiry calls will look even worse in retrospect if the Casey report confirms that an inquiry was exactly what was needed. All those parliamentary answers, all those dismissive responses, all that political positioning will look like either incompetence or arrogance. Neither is a good look for a prime minister. The Conservative strategy of forcing a parliamentary vote is politically brilliant because it turns Labour's previous position into a weapon against them. Every Labour MP will have to choose between supporting their leader's previous stance or accepting that he was wrong. It's like asking someone to choose between admitting they were wrong or continuing to be wrong publicly. The phrase, "day of shame," isn't hyperbole, it's an accurate description of what happens when political calculations collide with moral imperatives. When you've been arguing against doing the right thing for political reasons, being forced to do it anyway becomes a public humiliation. It's like being caught lying and then having to tell the truth while everyone watches. Badenoch's framing of this as a choice between being a lawyer and being a leader is particularly effective because it suggests that Starmer's legal background is actually a liability in political leadership, the implication that legal caution is preventing moral courage, that parsing technicalities is more important than protecting children. The fear of civil unrest isn't just about public order, it's about political legitimacy. When people lose faith in institutions to deliver justice through normal channels, they start looking for alternative methods. That's not just a policing problem, that's a democratic crisis waiting to happen. The government's apparent nervousness shows they understand that this isn't just another political scandal, this is the kind of revelation that changes the relationship between citizens and the state permanently, like discovering that the people you trusted to protect you have actually been protecting your abusers instead. The connection between undocumented arrivals and grooming gangs that the report apparently makes isn't just politically sensitive, it's politically explosive. It confirms suspicions that have been dismissed as racist conspiracy theories and gives them official credibility. That's the kind of validation that can reshape political discourse overnight. The institutional response to the Rochdale convictions shows how little has actually changed despite all the promises of reform. The same pattern of apologies and admissions that we've seen for years, the same promises to do better, the same refusal to acknowledge that the system itself might be fundamentally broken. The fact that these crimes took place between 2001 and 2006, with convictions only happening now, shows just how broken the justice system has been. 20 years to get justice for child abuse is not a justice system, it's a justice theory that occasionally produces results by accident. The scale of Operation Linton, with 37 charged and more trials to come, reveals that we're not dealing with isolated incidents but systematic abuse that was allowed to continue for decades. Each conviction represents not just individual criminality but institutional failure on an epic scale. The political calculation that Starmer made in resisting calls for an inquiry is about to be tested in the most public way possible. If the Casey report confirms that an inquiry was needed, then every argument he made against it will look like either poor judgment or political cowardice. There's no good way to spin being wrong about protecting children. The recommendation to explore allegations of a cover-up is particularly damaging because it suggests that the failures weren't just passive negligence but active concealment. That's the difference between incompetence and corruption, between failure and betrayal. It's the kind of distinction that destroys political careers and institutional credibility. The parliamentary vote that's being proposed isn't just about policy, it's about accountability. It's asking MPs to vote on whether they think children deserve protection and whether institutions should be held accountable for failure. The fact that this is even controversial tells you everything you need to know about political priorities. The Conservative strategy of timing this vote just after the Casey report is released is politically ruthless but democratically appropriate. If an independent report recommends an inquiry, Parliament should vote on whether to accept that recommendation. The fact that this creates political difficulties for Labour is secondary to the democratic process. The fear that knowledge of connections between illegal migration and grooming gangs could trigger unrest shows how explosive these issues have become. But suppressing information to prevent unrest isn't democracy, it's authoritarianism with good intentions. Sometimes the truth is uncomfortable, but that doesn't make it optional. The institutional apologies from police and council officials ring particularly hollow because they follow the same script we've heard countless times before: acknowledge failure, express regret, promise, reform, repeat. Meanwhile, the systems that produce these failures remain largely unchanged and largely unaccountable. The political danger facing Labour isn't just about this specific issue, it's about the broader question of whether they can be trusted to make difficult decisions when political considerations conflict with moral imperatives. The grooming gang scandal has become a test case for political courage, and they appear to be failing it spectacularly. The Casey report represents a kind of independent scrutiny that politicians fear most: competent, credible, and beyond their control. They can't spin it, dismiss it, or bury it. They have to respond to it, and their response will be judged by whether it prioritizes political damage control or child protection. The convictions in Rochdale, happening just as this political drama unfolds, serve as a stark reminder of what this is actually about: real children suffered real abuse while institutions failed them. The political theater is secondary to that human cost, but the political theater might be what finally forces accountability. The connection between these convictions and the broader grooming gang scandal isn't just statistical, it's symbolic. Each conviction represents not just individual justice but systematic failure. The fact that it's taken decades to achieve even these convictions shows how broken the system has been. The recommendation for a national inquiry to explore race and cover up allegations isn't just about gathering information, it's about confronting truths that have been politically inconvenient. Sometimes democracy requires us to face uncomfortable realities rather than comfortable illusions. The timing of all these events isn't coincidental, it's consequential. The Casey report, the Rochdale convictions, the parliamentary vote, the political pressure, they're all part of a reckoning that's been building for years. The question isn't whether this reckoning will happen, but whether it will produce justice or just more political theater. The fear of civil unrest shows that the government understands the stakes involved. This isn't just about political careers or party fortunes, it's about social cohesion and democratic legitimacy. When institutions fail this badly for this long, the social contract starts breaking down. The Conservative attack lines about Starmer needing to stop being a lawyer and start being a leader will resonate because they tap into broader frustrations about political leadership. People want leaders who can make difficult decisions, not lawyers who can find reasons to avoid them. The parliamentary vote on Wednesday could become a defining moment for this parliament, not just because of the policy implications but because of what it reveals about political priorities and moral courage. Some votes are about policy details, others are about fundamental values. So there you have it, political junkies and concerned citizens alike. We're looking at a potential political earthquake that could reshape the landscape faster than you can say, U-turn. Report so damaging the government fears riots, a prime minister whose position looks more precarious than a house of cards in a hurricane, and a justice system that's apparently better at prosecuting people who complain about crimes than those who commit them. The Casey report could be the political equivalent of a neutron bomb. It destroys the government's position while leaving the institutions technically intact. Starmer's months of resistance to inquiry calls could go from looking principled to looking catastrophically misjudged faster than you can say, political career suicide. This isn't just another Westminster bubble story that'll be forgotten by next week. This is about children, justice, institutional failure, and democratic accountability. It's about whether our political system can confront uncomfortable truths when political calculations suggest it would be easier to look the other way. The next few days could be absolutely pivotal for British politics: a report on Monday, Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday, a potential parliamentary vote, and a Conservative Party that can smell blood in the water from across the Thames. If you thought politics was dramatic before, you haven't seen anything yet. Keep your eyes peeled, your coffee strong, and your skepticism stronger, because UK Daily Coffee will be covering every twist, turn, and potential U-turn in this unfolding drama. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell, because with British politics moving this fast and politicians changing position so quickly, you'll need us to help you keep track of who's saying what and whether they meant it. The political rollercoaster never stops. Regret, promise reform, repeat. Meanwhile, the systems that produce these failures remain largely unchanged and largely unaccountable. The political danger facing Labour isn't just about this specific issue, it's about the broader question of whether they can be trusted to make difficult decisions when political considerations conflict with moral imperatives. The grooming gang scandal has become a test case for political courage, and they appear to be failing it spectacularly. The Casey report represents a type of independent scrutiny that politicians fear most: competent, credible, and beyond their control. They can't spin it, dismiss it, or bury it, they have to respond to it. And their response will be judged by whether it prioritizes political damage control or child protection. The convictions in Rochdale, happening just as this political drama unfolds, serve as a stark reminder of what this is actually about. Real children suffered real abuse while institutions failed them. The political theater is secondary to that human cost, but the political theater might be what finally forces accountability. The connection between these convictions and the broader grooming gang scandal isn't just statistical, it's symbolic. Each conviction represents not just individual justice but systemic failure. The fact that it's taken decades to achieve even these convictions shows how broken the system has been. The recommendation for a national inquiry to explore race and cover up allegations isn't just about gathering information, it's about confronting truths that have been politically inconvenient. Sometimes democracy requires us to face uncomfortable realities rather than comfortable illusions. The timing of all these events isn't coincidental, it's consequential. The Casey report, the Rochdale convictions, the parliamentary vote, the political pressure, they're all part of a reckoning that's been building for years. The question isn't whether this reckoning will happen, but whether it will produce justice or just more political theater. The fear of civil unrest shows that the government understands the stakes involved. This isn't just about political careers or party fortunes, it's about social cohesion and democratic legitimacy. When institutions fail this badly for this long, the social contract starts breaking down. The Conservative attack lines about Starmer needing to stop being a lawyer and start being a leader will resonate because they tap into broader frustrations about political leadership. People want leaders who can make difficult decisions, not lawyers who can find reasons to avoid them. The parliamentary vote on Wednesday could become a defining moment for this parliament, not just because of the policy implications but because of what it reveals about political priorities and moral courage. Some votes are about policy details, others are about fundamental values. So there you have it, political junkies and concerned citizens alike, we're looking at a potential political earthquake that could reshape the landscape faster than you can say, U-turn. A report so damaging the government fears riots, a prime minister whose position looks more precarious than a house of cards in a hurricane, and a justice system that's apparently better at prosecuting people who complain about crimes than those who commit them. The Casey report could be the political equivalent of a neutron bomb. It destroys the government's position while leaving the institutions technically intact. Starmer's months of resistance to inquiry calls could go from looking principled to looking catastrophically misjudged faster than you can say, political career suicide. This isn't just another Westminster bubble story that'll be forgotten by next week, this is about children, justice, institutional failure, and democratic accountability. It's about whether our political system can confront uncomfortable truths when political calculations suggest it would be easier to look the other way. The next few days could be absolutely pivotal for British politics, a report on Monday, Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday, a potential parliamentary vote, and a Conservative Party that can smell blood in the water from across the Thames. If you thought politics was dramatic before, you haven't seen anything yet. Keep your eyes peeled, your coffee strong, and your skepticism stronger, because UK Daily Coffee will be covering every twist, turn, and potential U-turn in this unfolding drama. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell, because with British politics moving this fast and politicians changing position so quickly, you'll need us to help you keep track of who's saying what and whether they meant it. At this time, the political rollercoaster never stops. Regarding statistics about different groups and grooming gang perpetrators, Baroness Casey's report highlights significant issues with data collection. She found that ethnicity data is not recorded for 2/3 of grooming gang perpetrators, making it difficult to make definitive national statements. However, in the local data examined from 3 police forces, Greater Manchester, South Yorkshire, and West Yorkshire, the audit did identify clear evidence of overrepresentation among suspects of Asian and Pakistani heritage men in group-based child sexual exploitation. Baroness Casey stated that, if you look at the data on child sexual exploitation suspects and offenders, it's disproportionately Asian heritage, but also added that, if you look at the data for child abuse, it is not disproportionate, and it is white men. It's important to note that while there have been high-profile cases involving men of Pakistani heritage, other reports and data sources, such as those from the Ministry of Justice and the Office for National Statistics, have shown that the majority of offenders prosecuted for child sexual abuse offences in England and Wales are white. For example, a 2025 report by the Centre of Expertise on Child Sexual Abuse, citing Ministry of Justice statistics, indicated that of the 69% of cases where ethnicity was recorded, 90% of offenders were white, 5% Asian, 2% black, 2% mixed, and 1% other. White offenders were found to be disproportionately overrepresented compared to their 81.7% representation in the general population of England and Wales according to the 2021 census. The report also calls for improved and mandatory collection of ethnicity and nationality data for all suspects in child sexual abuse and criminal exploitation cases to provide a clearer picture. The conviction figures for Rotherham's Operation Stovewood show that as of June 2024, 33 individuals have been convicted under this specific operation, with further trials scheduled. The abuse in Rotherham, affecting an estimated 1,400 girls predominantly between the late 1980s and 2013, involved grooming gangs largely composed of British Pakistani men. The specific comparison mentioned in the text about more convictions for one day of rioting in Rotherham than there have been for 25 years of grooming gang activity reflects a sentiment about the perceived swiftness of justice for public disorder versus the prolonged struggle for justice in child abuse cases. While precise, directly comparable numerical figures for riot convictions in Rotherham versus grooming gang convictions over that specific 25-year period are not readily available in the search results, the broader point highlights concerns about the responsiveness of the justice system to different types of crime.